we have a very interesting panel for you today called the Egyptian Regulatory Environment Fireside Chat, being held here. Regulatory approaches to fintech are very wildly different across the continent. With equally diverse outcomes, the plenary session frames the day's discussion today. And I have the absolute pleasure of introducing my new friend, the moderator for this panel, James French. James French is, well, he's a fintech and treasury director turned entrepreneur. He served as the treasury director for Citigroup in West Central Africa, as well as he's now advising U.S. Treasury, the U.S. Treasury on the central banks on Africa. He turned an entrepreneur, and he's solving now liquidity problems and in treasury issues. Welcome on stage, James. I would also be, thank you. Yeah. Yes, James will be introducing his panel. Yes, you can please use anything.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, James.
I appreciate that. Let me just correct one or two points. I'm not with the U.S. Treasury right now. I used to be at the Office of Technical Assistance at the U.S. Treasury, advising central banks and ministries of finance. And from there, I went to the IFC and became a bank director in their independent directors program. Now having kind of gone the full spectrum from large bank transactions to understanding the full potential of SMEs and the dynamic growth of small business and entrepreneurs, I'm launching a startup called Anansi. And Anansi seeks to resolve the last mile bottlenecks in the remittance sector, where there are liquidity and FX issues that prevent efficient transactions, efficient remittances to occur. And we have a very interesting model to resolve those problems. And I'd be happy to speak to people after this. So I'm very pleased today to have my old profession, central banks, to discuss regulatory reform and in support of the fintech sector in Egypt. So without further ado, I would like to invite up the panelists who are going to join me today. And we have Mr. Ahmed Monir, head of regulatory Sandbox at the Central Bank of Egypt. Mr. Monir, if you would like to come and join us. Thank you. We have Moustafa Moharram, senior partner at Moharram and Partners. Mr. Moharram. Mr. Tarek Ibrahim is at the Financial Regulatory Authority, principal IT consultant. Great. So, thank you all for joining. I'd like, does everyone have their mic? Everyone's mic'd up, great. Mr. Monir, I'd like to begin with you. And if you could just talk a little bit about the Sandbox initiative at the central bank. Egypt has emerged in the last 3 years as a leader in Africa and the Middle East for fintech innovation, as we've heard several times today. And if you could just give us a brief outline of what the Egyptian fintech landscape is and the strategy of your Sandbox initiative.
Okay. First, I'd like to welcome my dear friends, Mr. Moustafa and Mr. Tarek, and for sure, Mr. French.
Thank you.
When we are talking about the regulatory fintech landscape, I think fintech itself is a multidisciplinary term. And accordingly, fintech domain is governed and regulated by multi-sectors and multi-regulatory entities, and as well many of regulations and laws. So when we speak about Egypt, we can categorize fintech landscape according to two main categories. The first one related to the financial services, banking financial services, and another one for non-banking financial services. And when it comes to Egypt, and according to the Egyptian constitution, Central Bank of Egypt is responsible to regulate banking financial services like payment, like remittance, currencies. And on the other hand, FRA is responsible for regulating non-banking financial activities like capital market activities, insurance, etc. So the main category will be divided according to the Egyptian constitution into these main topics. Also, we cannot forget AML, or anti-money laundering regulations rule, that its rule is binding on both banking and non-banking financial services. As well, we have another regulatory entity, NTRA, or National Telecom Regulator. Yeah, when it comes to financial services based on mobile applications. So we have four main regulating entities inside the Egyptian market: Central Bank of Egypt for banking financial services, and FRA for non-banking financial services, and NTRA and AML finally. From our perspective, and because of the intersected nature of the fintech activities, you cannot make this kind of sharp segregation between the activities. So, Central Bank, in cooperation with our colleagues in FRA and AML unit and NTRA as well, collaborated and signed some kind of memorandum of understanding to mandate the collaboration between these concerned entities. So we have make a fintech committee. Fintech committee is governed and regulated by the four entities to handle this kind of intersection in the regulatory landscape in Egypt.
Thank you. I want to jump over to Mr. Moharram. And you're a public policy advisor, and as such, you perhaps bridge between the private sector and the public sector. And we've heard just now an outline of from the central bank's point of view of how the sector is structured. What is your perception? How do you see the fintech ecosystem from your perspective?
Many thanks, James. Great pleasure to be here among friends. Yes. Ahmed, Monir, of course, and Khalid Bey. And talking about the environment and the fintech environment in Egypt with the two regulators on the panel is quite a dangerous proposition, I would say. But I always say, actually, to my team, as public policy advisors, we need to be diplomatic in public settings and actually straightforward in actually more private ones. Today, I consider myself among friends, so I'll be very straightforward and try as much as possible to represent the viewpoints of private sector when it comes to the environment in Egypt. There is no doubt that actually Egypt has made tremendous progress over the past actually decade when it comes to financial inclusion and of course to financial technology. I was actually proud to be part of a team that actually talked to His Excellency the Presidency the first time regarding e-payments in 2014, actually during his visit to New York. Now we've got actually a room full of investors and actually entrepreneurs very much interested in the Egyptian market and very much enthusiastic about its potential. There is no doubt that Egypt has a lot of potential to offer to companies and to different entrepreneurs working in this field, demographics, whether we're talking about also infrastructure, ICT infrastructure and internet connectivity, all of those actually aspects are quite important for the enabling environment. That said, and of course we've got very supporting regulators when it comes to, of course, the Central Bank of Egypt, including the team, the Payment and Information Technology team, and the Financial Regulatory Authority also team. So we've got regulators that are conscious about the importance of financial inclusion and fintech, and that are really trying to actually to help and support in providing this enabling environment. We've got so many laws and regulatory frameworks that are coming actually and are being issued every month, the latest being the Instant Payment actually network that was issued by the CBE. We've got the regulatory, basically Sandbox initiative, which is actually a very exciting initiative for a lot of fintechs. Now, in terms of regulations, which is actually quite an important angle to tackle, we believe that Egyptian regulators focused on regulating the environment and through the laws that were and the frameworks that were issued more than on the enabling side of things, which are two different propositions here. So regulating fintechs, we think that this is happening. There are many frameworks.
So you're saying enabling versus regulating?
Yes,
okay.
Exactly.
So and elaborate a little bit on the difference.
Yes, regulating means that basically is providing government oversight over basically the technology, which is very important because actually it will help in building trust in the technology and protecting, of course, citizens in terms of basically their rights and money, etc. Enabling is actually responding to the specific actually demands from the industry that are here today and trying to see what are the pain points that are actually impeding them to grow and to actually to offer more services and being able to tackle those as part of the regulations. To conclude basically this first intervention, I believe the CBE and the FIA did a wonderful job in terms of providing this legislative infrastructure and regulatory infrastructure for payments and fintech in Egypt. But we still need basically more when it comes to enabling, more when it comes to listening to actually to the players here. And this could only be done through private-public consultations. We want to see in Egypt, as it happens in other parts of the world, the regulators putting the draft frameworks on their website, calling for actually companies to contribute and provide input before the regulations are issued. Because as you know, and you're now leading companies, investors do not like surprises. And this is the key point that we need actually, and I'm sure that actually with our friends at the CBE and the FIA, we could actually put more effort into it in the near future.
Thank you. I really appreciate how you distinguish between the two aspects of enabling versus the regulatory framework, and I want to come back to that. Before we come back to that, I would like to offer you, Mr.
Here, just I'd like to mention something.
Mm-hmm.
The new generation of central banks and regulators moved from the step of being just regulating, then enabling. Now we are in the phase of being a catalyst for change. So I just wanted to highlight this, and the difference is much better between being just regulating, strict regulator, or just enable or enabler who is doing his best to enable or to facilitate. Now, the new rule of the central banks and regulators all over the world in terms of digital transformation to be a catalyst for change. You are creating the ecosystem in case of not ready ecosystem. And that's the rule is what central bank currently doing in terms of the 5 main pillars of our strategy. And we are in cooperation, sure, with FRA, our partners in this issue. We are making it as a catalyst for change. So just, I'm sorry for the interruptions.
No, it's actually where I hope this conversation goes, and I appreciate
thank you.
And it would be great to hear some. I know that you have a cohort system, and you're in your second cohort now, and I imagine that.
Yeah, I think we can talk about this later after Mr. Tarek.
Sure. So, Mr. Ibrahim, would you help us to understand the non-banking sector regulatory approach to fintech? How does it interact with the overall strategy of the ecosystem?
Absolutely. Thank you, James. Thank you, Moharram. The non-banking financial services market as a regulator, I'm just gonna pick on a point that was said. A regulator is not just a facilitator or an enabler. We have to always remember that the regulator's main purpose is to grow and stabilize the market while protecting the interests of all market stakeholders. That's what we're here for. It's not just to put regulations. Regulations are just the representation of the governance or the frameworks that we believe or the regulator believes can help the market grow in a controllable, stable fashion. So definitely looking into how technology impacts the change of financial products, non-banking financial products in particular, the nature of the products changes, the nature of the transactions that happens between the beneficiaries, the consumers, and the service providers changes, and that puts a burden on the regulator to be able to continue to monitor and see the conduct and make sure that the behavior falls within the compliance and the acceptable conduct that the market is allowing. So this is at a very high level. The non-banking financial services, like Ahmed stated earlier, is 3 primary sub-markets. The capital market, which includes the regulation of all financial instruments, securities, tradable or non-tradable, raising of capital, the capitalizations of corporations, and so on and so forth. So be that for to be traded in securities market or non-tradable. We also have the non-banking second market is the insurance, which includes life insurance, non-life insurance, as well as pension funds. And the third one is what we call the lending market. And this is where the gray area or the cooperation happens between the Financial Regulatory Authority and the Central Bank of Egypt. Financial products for lending purposes can be offered from banks, according to the Egyptian constitution, or non-banks. If non-banks offer these services, like mortgage companies, leasing companies, small, medium enterprise, micro and nano financing companies, consumer financing, all these forms of lenders, if they are non-banks, they are being regulated and overlooked by the Financial Regulatory Authority. So hopefully this explains the regulatory framework. Now, for us, the main value for fintech, the common, is not just if we want to represent this as a model, we have capital market, we have insurance, and they common between us and the central bank, which is the lending products. The infrastructure for all is the money transfer. So all money transfer is governed by and regulated by the Central Bank of Egypt. So in our regulations, we mandate that any money transfer, any remittance of money, any loans being transferred, or any premiums being paid, or installments being paid, this has to be done over the regulated infrastructure from the Central Bank of Egypt.
Quick follow-up on that. Since this is a sandbox conversation,
okay.
I'm wondering what is the role of the non-banking sector in supporting some of these fintech initiatives? Because a lot of what
Sure.
fintech kind of lives within is that gray area that you mentioned.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
how does that work for fintech?
So the challenge we have is the legislative our legislative landscape has been an amalgamation of multiple laws that came from different eras.
Right.
And while we have the ability, in the interim term, over the last 2 years, we've spent a lot of effort. We have this, what we call open door policy. Anybody, any startup or any fintech company who has a particular idea, that they can come share their business plan with us. And we have an internal committee where we analyze their products. And if it qualifies to be non-banking financial services, we give them some guidance how to start up within the existing laws. So we may give them an ability to operate, or give them guidance to operate with or without an official license, while monitoring their progress, depending on where they are. So we have this, if you want to call it, advisory role that we do, where we invite fintech companies and we tell them currently this is not being regulated. So until it comes out, just take this into consideration. At some point in time, a regulation may come out and you may need to do corrective actions to prove your conformance.
So there's
But
flexibility in the,
absolutely,
yes. in that gray area.
Absolutely, and we have a lot of examples for that.
Yeah.
So it's not a formal sandbox with cohorts and things like that. It's an on-demand type of a sandboxing approach.
Mr. Monir, I'd like to come back to you about
Please.
the regulatory framework. There have been a lot of changes recently in the environment, in the ecosystem, in terms of just evolution of the regulatory framework. Could you just maybe talk to that a little bit?
First, let's agree that regulatory and legislative reform should be ongoing process and continuous. First, I'd like to shed the light on some of our CBE efforts maybe 3 years ago, starting from introducing the new less cash law. I think it was in 2019, in a cooperation with the National Payment Council and all concerned parties in the Egyptian governments. So we have issued and introduced this law that mandating all governmental payments, including collections, that exceeded £500 to be through the electronic and the digital payment instruments. I think you cannot imagine the volume of this transaction and the value as well. That makes this, the execution of this law is really a great step towards the fully digitalization of the government payments and collections, and for sure for facilitating for the citizen to pay all payments and collections with the government, which represent a very huge volume and value, and achieving the financial inclusion. Another thing Let me say that we have worked in terms of regulations in 3 main pillars. The first pillar was laws, and the second pillar was the regulations, and the third pillar was the untraditional method, which is a risk-based approach, or we can call it our regulatory sandbox. Back to the laws, Central Bank of Egypt has issued its law, its banking sector law, that modifying a lot and adding a lot of new articles. I think the law number 194 for the year 2020. That is the new CBE law that regulating and governing CBE work. CBE has devoted an entire section in this law for the electronic payments systems and the fintech as well. Maybe articles from 201 and till 206 is tackling the new fintech attitude or approach, the regulatory approach for the central bank, tackling many hot topics like mandating open APIs, digital consent, digital archiving, digital identity, establishing the regulatory sandbox, as well as we can say the digital and the crypto currencies. So these articles has been classified as a great step towards digitization, not only in the banking sector, but also in the whole country. Currently now we are working in cooperation with FRA for introducing the new law of alternative finance law that regulates all alternative financing platforms currently working in Egypt, like peer-to-peer lending, ROSCA model, crowdfunding. We are working with our colleagues in FRA to produce a legislative law to give us the chance to regulate and mandate the requirements of providing this service inside the Egyptian market. Let me say that our legislative reform cannot be isolated from the main direction of the country. We have also some other supportive laws like digital signature law, anti-cyber and information technology crime law, personal data protection law. All these ecosystem or all these combination can facilitate and should facilitate to help Egypt international-wise for our digital transformation. When it comes to regulation, we have recently issued maybe more than 10 regulations. For example, we have issued the regulation of mobile payment and technical standards for acceptance of the issuance and acceptance of the contactless payments. Also, we have issued regulations related to IPN, instant payment networking. Also, we have issued the regulations of the facilitating and payment facilitators and the payment aggregators. So, in this regard, we are working, I can say, in a daily basis to support the market and according to the needs of the fintech activities currently in Egypt. The last approach is relating to the untraditional approach as deploying our regulatory sandbox as a testing based. So we can push our fintechs and encourage them and limit the time for them for deploying in the market.
Thank you. That's very interesting. So that sounds like a very comprehensive set of regulatory evolution and changes. And so, Mr. Moharram, you brought up the issue of enabling environment versus a regulatory environment. So I want to combine maybe two questions for you, which is, having heard this description of the evolution over the past couple of years or so, or several years, where would you say Egypt might be in 5 years from now in terms of its enabling environment? And within that, or also included in that question, would be a comparison. Some countries have gone, have taken on this enabling aspect directly, and they've assisted fintechs directly with assisting in their growth. Do you see that happening in this region as well?
Thank you, James. Okay, so where Egypt would be in 5 years, that would depend very much on what we basically as regulators would actually invest in right now, which is actually very important. And as Ahmed said, now we believe that basically that this enabling approach to the ecosystem is important and basically leading also the ecosystem change. Part of the problem or the challenges is actually the too many laws that we have in Egypt now and the overwhelming regulatory framework. So we've talked about different regulators being here, including the CBE, FRA, National Telecom Regulatory Authority, as well as other actually regulators. This needs streamlining. We need to have another look on the macro picture and actually see how we could streamline the licenses for all of those investors that are here in Egypt and that would like actually, in order to ease business for them. Many of them comes to us and they are lost with those licenses that needs to be issued on so many things. That's one of the first issues. In terms, in the specific area of actually data privacy, we have 2 regulators now. We have the new Data Protection Center, as well as, of course, the CBE when it comes to financial data. That doesn't mean that actually the regulatory frameworks are bad, but it means that they need to be revisited. As Ahmed suggested now, this is a moving target. They need to be continuously revisited, and in order to be able to respond to the specific demands of actually the industry. When it comes to actually issues and topics that we hear from different investors and that are on the that would need to be addressed by the policy agenda, we've got the independent e-money issuer license, which is actually a road that needs to be taken in order to advance basically the payments and the fintech basically landscape in Egypt beyond even the banking sector, which is actually a very important topic. We've got crypto and many of the panelists today talked about their importance. We cannot just ignore developments happening on the crypto side. We need to engage with them and see what we could actually implement in Egypt. Another important topic that we've heard a lot is actually things regarding infrastructure, cloud adoption in the financial sector and actually fintech. This is really costly for many investors that would like to work in the market and that still needs to rely on local servers actually to host their data. This needs, of course, we're not saying that this needs to be completely open, but within a regulated environment, we think that basically more progress should be done on those fronts. We rely a lot, and I'll conclude with this, on actually very competent and basically experienced officials such as Ahmed, Monir, and Mr. Khalid Ibrahim to advance the cause of fintech within the CBE and the FRA, and to advocate, to play the role of the devil's advocate, if I would say, I would say so, in order to push the boundaries of things. And they're already doing this, but we have more and more expectations. People in this room basically are waiting for more things to happen. We're already very happy, of course, with the progress achieved so far. but we're looking forward for more.
Thank you, thank you. So, Mr. Monir, you're in high demand. This is what I'm hearing. I'm hearing that there's a desire.
And Mr. Tarek as well.
Yes, and I'm hearing that I'm hearing two things, really, two themes. One is streamlining, and the other is more active participation.
Sure.
And it sounds like that a conversation is underway between the private sector and the regulators, and that's the way it should be. Sure. There should be a discourse.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's all the time we have, and I want to thank you all. This has been a fascinating conversation.
Thank you very much.
And I've really appreciated it, and I hope everyone else found it enriching as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we have another good news for you. We have a flash pitch. We'll just wait for our panelists to finish off. All right, so we have for you today 3 flash pitches. By flash pitches, we're going to invite 3 tech startups that we believe should be distinguished and celebrated as well with us today. The first pitch is going to be for the company Cognerium, and it will be presented by Kishore Sharma, co-founder and CEO. Welcome on stage, Kishore.
Okay, so thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone here. And I think a couple of our panel speakers have just left. So my name is Kishore Sharma, and the co-founder for Cognerium. Our company is an AI and digital company, and we have a flagship banking platform. It's called Newton Digital Banking Platform. So this particular platform serves in 3 different business areas. 1 is on the lending side of it, 2 on the wealth side of it, and 3 on the risk and compliance side of it. As we were hearing from the panel speakers, right, how important it is to have those regulatory aspects, right, covered, and also the growth that we are seeing, especially in these MENA region, is tremendous. So with this particular platform, you can launch your new business ideas and products, as well as if you have existing business, you want to do a digital transformation, you can use this particular platform. So it basically helps you to quickly launch your existing business or new products, right? So in terms of our presence, we are in US and in MENA region, and we have been supported by Harvard REAP Advisory Group and also the Harvard Startup. So I'm here today basically to partner with likewise companies who are looking to basically launch their products, are looking in terms of digital transformation. So I look forward to see if any of you are interested. I would like to stop by my stall, or you can also visit our company for more information. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much.